To start with, my sister-in-law, Zara, was an incredibly warm and generous person. She always greeted me with kindness and made me feel like I was a sister from the very first day I met her. Over the years, since we were both working ladies, we had gotten incredibly close with each other and spent our weekends shopping or going to lunch together. Zara was always a very fit person and took incredible care of her health. This is why when she received the devastating news of her breast cancer diagnosis, it shook all of us deeply. We rallied around her and gave her our support to fight back against the cancer. I made it a point to visit her regularly during her chemotherapy sessions, to spend time with her or watch over my baby niece whenever I could. During one of my visits to her place, as we sat together in her living room, she shared with me a piece of news that shattered my heart. Her voice trembled as she revealed that her doctors had delivered a crushing update. Her cancer was aggressive and was resistant to treatment. They had given her a prognosis that left little room for hope. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and I struggled to find the right words to comfort her. In that vulnerable moment, I asked her what I could do to make things easier for her. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth and laughter, now reflected a mix of fear and resignation. She told me that she was grateful for everything that I had done for her and wished she didn't have to burden me with a secret that she had kept hidden from everyone. I firmly told her that she had nothing to apologize for and that I would do anything for her, no questions asked. It was then that she entrusted me with a secret she had never revealed to anyone, including her own parents. She confided in me that years ago, during her college days, she endured a harrowing experience that had haunted her ever since. It was at a party, a night blurred by too much alcohol, when she found herself the victim of a sexual assault. The perpetrator wore a mask, making it impossible for her to identify him. The trauma of that night had left deep scars that she had carried silently for years. As she recounted the events of that fateful evening, I listened in horror. She was in a relationship with my brother at the time, hence naturally, she turned to him for support and comfort, hoping that he would be the one person in the world who would understand her. However, instead of finding solace in his embrace, she was met with disbelief and blame. My brother couldn't comprehend how another man could violate her in such a way, and in his shock, he started questioning her about her actions. He implied that perhaps it was her attire or behavior towards the guy in the party that had invited the assault on her. He refused to believe that a man could just do something like this to a woman without the woman giving him some type of signal. SIL was devastated that he was questioning her this way. The weight of shame and guilt unfairly placed upon her shoulders by someone she loved only added to her anguish. Despite this, she gathered the courage to report the assault to the police and even went for a medical test which proved her statement about the assault, since she wanted the perpetrator punished. However, unfortunately for my SIL, she lived in a college neighborhood where parties were commonplace, and thousands of students mingled under the cover of night, so the police could not identify the masked assailant, no matter how much they tried. It also did not help that none of the people present in the party came forward to testify for her. As a result, the investigation went nowhere and my SIL never got her justice. At the time, her parents were alive, so they were the only ones who believed in her, and this is how she was able to overcome the deep shame of what had happened to her. According to SIL, after months of talking to my brother about the incident, he eventually came around and apologized to her for his initial reaction. He admitted that he should have known better to trust her and promised that he would support her better from then on. Despite the strain in the relationship, SIL didn't want to end things with him, so she decided to forgive him. In the years that followed, although my brother tried his best to be there for her, she was always haunted by the incident. I was devastated hearing this, since my brother had never mentioned any of this to me. SIL pointed out to me how my brother never liked talking about this, and he had in fact told SIL to always keep this incident a secret, as if it was dirty for others to find out. I squeezed SIL's hand softly and told her that I did not judge her for anything that had happened to her because it was never her fault. SIL smiled back wryly and told me that she had more to tell me. She spoke haltingly, as if each word was both a confession and a plea for understanding. She then revealed that she had been sexually assaulted again after the first incident, but this time it was by her former boss at her previous job. I remembered how 2 to 3 years ago, she had left her job out of the blue, even though she had always liked working at her position. SIL had never told me the reason why until then. Her hands trembled as she recounted the fear and helplessness she felt during the second assault. She told me she felt numb with shock during the entire thing and was only able to move once the assault had ended. Tears streamed down her face as she fled the scene in a haze, her whole body shaking with the weight of what had just happened. She described feeling disconnected from everything, as if she were experiencing the entire ordeal from outside her own body. Later, when she sat in her car crying, her initial thoughts turned to my brother, and she knew from his last reaction that he would again blame her this time. She told me how she felt that shame returning when she realized she had let yet another man violate her without her consent. She felt unclean and disgusted towards herself. This time the trauma took a toll on her mental health because, unlike last time, she didn't have anyone to talk to anymore. Her parents had passed away and she was scared to open up to my brother. As a result, she plunged into depression and even had a few panic attacks. SIL told me that she wrestled with the decision to report the assault to the police and get her boss arrested or protect her marriage. Then 3 weeks later, she discovered that she was pregnant. At that moment, she knew with certainty that the child was not my brother's. The weight of this realization depressed her further. She was unsure of how to break the news to my brother since she thought he would definitely ask her for a divorce. As a result, due to her depleting mental health, SIL had resolved to end her life. She told me how at that time, she felt so helpless since she lacked the strength to terminate the pregnancy and also didn't want people finding out about her assaults. I listened to her story, holding back tears, not able to believe everything she had gone through, silently without any of us realizing anything. SIL continued to tell me how the evening when she had chosen to end her life with sleeping pills, everything suddenly changed when my brother, out of nowhere, discovered the positive pregnancy tests in the washroom. Instead of waiting for an explanation, he started jumping up and down in joy, expressing his happiness that she was pregnant and that they could finally start a family together. Caught up in his jubilation and enveloped in his embrace, she found herself unable to shatter his happiness with the truth. She later confided in me how ashamed she felt for not finding the courage to tell him the truth that day, or over the course of the last 2 years, that the child was never his. SIL told me how every time she witnessed the tender moments between her daughter and my brother, her heart broke anew. Tears streamed down her face as she apologized to me for lying to my brother and everyone else and even called herself a coward and a loser who didn't deserve such a wonderful family like ours. According to her, she felt getting cancer was God's way of punishing her for her lies. She told me she would be eventually confessing everything to my brother before she passed away. However, she wanted me to promise her something. It turns out that she wanted me to look after her daughter when she was gone. She held my hands as she begged me that, since she didn't have any family members left as both her parents and grandparents were long gone, I was her only hope who could potentially take care of her daughter if my brother didn't accept the child after finding out the entire truth. I was quite shaken after hearing everything and took some time to process everything. As a woman myself, I felt a deep sympathy for everything she had been through. I knew she was telling me the entire truth because she was dying and needed to get everything off her chest. Of course, I understood that she had lied to my brother all this time about being the father of the baby, but she was also clearly remorseful, and at this point, there was nothing I could do other than to assure her that I would raise my niece myself if I had to. She breathed a sigh of relief after I made my promise to her. Over the weeks, as SIL's illness progressed, I continued to visit her, holding on to her hope of survival even as the reality of her condition grew more stark. Through it all, she remained courageous as much as she could. In the end, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her absence has left a void, but her spirit continues to still inspire me to live this life with compassion and gratitude. She has taught me that even in the darkest moments, there can be moments of grace and beauty if only we have the strength to see them. She was more than a sister-in-law to me, she was my friend and a true confidant. After her passing, my brother shared with me the contents of a letter left behind by my sister-in-law, laying bare the painful truths she had confided in me earlier. It was a heartbreaking revelation for him to learn that the child he had embraced with such joy was not biologically his own. His grief and anger were palpable as he grappled with this new reality, compounded by the recent loss of his wife. In his sorrow, he could not bring himself to hold the baby any longer, instead informing our parents and me that he would be giving her up. I firmly told him that SIL wanted me to look after my niece, so I wanted to take care of her if he no longer wanted her. This is how I brought my niece into my home without any hesitation. I felt so sad for her since she had just lost her mother and with no other family left, her parents and grandparents long gone. I knew she needed a stable and loving environment at the time. Later, when we gathered for the reading of my sister-in-law's will, emotions were already high since everyone by then already knew that my niece didn't belong to my brother. A lot of my family members were divided about this news, however SIL was no longer with us to take on their wrath. According to her will, she had made clear and deliberate provisions for her daughter's future, leaving every asset and resource she had made over the years for her daughter's well-being. Since SIL had received an inheritance from both her parents as well as her grandparents, she had a considerable amount of money to give. To my brother's disappointment, there was nothing allocated to him, a decision that only deepened his pain and sense of betrayal, and he loudly exclaimed how it was wrong of her to not leave him anything. In her will, SIL had exclusively mentioned that she entrusted the management of these funds to me if I would be willing to take on the role of caring for her daughter. I was surprised by this news, and so was everyone else who was present. I guess this is why SIL wanted me to make that promise to her weeks ago before she passed away, so she could change her will accordingly. She was right to trust her instincts and not let my brother have access to her funds, because if that were the case, he would have never let my niece have anything and would have abandoned her without any money. Since my brother was unwilling to continue caring for the child, I was eventually granted full custody of my niece, and with access to the financial provisions I had received, I've been able to take care of her all these years. My brother did try to fight me regarding the money SIL had left behind, since he felt he was entitled to receiving at least half of it. However, the judge didn't listen to him. In anger, my brother told me that he wanted nothing to do with SIL's daughter and insisted that he never wanted to see my face again since I had clearly betrayed him by taking in the girl. I firmly told him that I was sorry for all the hurt he felt, but that I was not going to go back on my promise to my SIL. I recognized that my sister-in-law had been wrong in withholding the truth from my brother. However, with her no longer with us, I firmly believe that the child should not bear any blame for her parents' actions. This is why my focus has always been entirely on providing a loving and stable environment for my niece, shielding her from the complexities of the past. Over the years, I've ensured that my niece has had everything she has wanted, using the funds left behind by my SIL. I have also bought her a home using the same which my niece will inherit fully when she comes of age. I've spared no effort in sending her to excellent schools and caring for her as if she were my own daughter. I have not been married and have dedicated my entire life to raising my niece. Despite my best efforts, my niece sometimes, understandably, has questions about her parents, particularly her dad. She misses my brother, but she also understands that under these circumstances, relationships cannot be forced. My decision to prioritize my niece's well-being has strained my relationships with the rest of my family. They've all chosen to sever ties with me, and no longer invite me to any event as they believe that my actions are misguided and that I've chosen my niece over my own family. Even my own parents believe I should have given up my niece and have repeatedly told me how disappointed they are that I am raising someone else's child who did nothing but lie to my brother. As you can imagine, the past years have been a difficult journey, where I have had to navigate the rift between what I believe is right and the consequences of those decisions on my familial relationships. This year, as my niece approaches her 18th birthday, I feel a sense of fulfillment in preparing to transfer all her assets, including the house I've secured for her, as per SIL's wishes. It's a milestone I've been preparing for a long time. I feel like I have done everything I could until now to protect her and she is now ready to make her own decisions. Just last week, out of nowhere, my brother contacted me, telling me how he needed to talk to me about something very important. My heart skipped a beat and I thought that perhaps he had seen the error in his ways and maybe he wanted to reconnect with me and my niece after all these years. I agreed to meet up with him, but I didn't want my niece to find out and give her false hopes before I could find out the actual reason behind his visit. Hence, I arranged for us to meet while she would be at school. When my brother arrived, there was a mix of anticipation and genuine warmth as we caught up with small talk. My brother told me how he had since remarried and I was pleasantly surprised to hear that he even had 2 children of his own. He showed me pictures of them and his boys looked like a splitting image of him. I was a little hurt that he had not even invited me to his wedding, but I also understood that he did what he had to do after the way SIL had betrayed him. During our conversation, I couldn't help but overflow with pride as I shared the achievements and progress my niece had made over the years. I told my brother how she would sometimes ask about him and was quite mature for her age, hoping that he would tell me that he wanted to meet with her perhaps. However, despite my eagerness to share these positive updates, he seemed least interested in my niece. He interrupted me, his tone shifting abruptly to one of seriousness, and told me that the reason he was in front of me was to not talk about my niece but to ask for ownership of my niece's house. I stared at him, wide-eyed, as he went on to explain how he and his family had recently lost their home and our parents had already loaned them a lot of money over the years so he could no longer go to them for any help. Since he knew that I had bought this house using SIL's money, he felt it was only right for me and my niece to let him have this house to accommodate his big family while we could move out to a much smaller place. I asked him what made him think that he could even ask us something like this. My brother went on to justify how in the past, he had done a lot for SIL, but according to him, that woman had turned out to be nothing but a leech. Now, I knew this wasn't true since SIL always had a job and paid for her own share of the house when she lived with my brother. Even when she underwent her chemo treatment, she paid for her expenses and also had health insurance. I pointed this out to my brother and told him that it was unfair of him to expect a house from all this when he did not even bother raising my niece after SIL passed away. However, this only pissed him off. He told me how as his sister, I should stop holding a candle for a dead woman who was long gone and instead help him and his family secure this house before my niece could turn 18. He urged me to see things from his perspective for once and how this place was his rightful property anyway. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. As I processed his request, I couldn't help but wrestle with the implications of such a decision. The house represented not just a physical asset, but a symbol of security and stability carefully planned for my niece's future. To relinquish it no matter how much my brother needed it would mean compromising on promises made and jeopardizing the stability I had worked so hard to provide. My niece's well-being and future were paramount, and any decision regarding her assets needed to be made with her best interests at heart, regardless of the challenges and emotions involved. In that moment, I realized the gravity of the situation and the importance of standing firm in what I believed was right. I firmly told him that I couldn't support his request because he needed to take responsibility for his own family instead of relying on his deceased wife's assets. I continued to tell him how ashamed I was that he even thought this was an option and that he had relinquished all rights when he had given up custody of the daughter to me after SIL's death. My brother's face flushed red with anger at my response, but I continued before he could interrupt again. I expressed my disappointment that he had not been there for my niece throughout all these years. I didn't hold back in reminding him that while I understood that SIL had betrayed him, he should also understand that she had been a victim of numerous traumas. It was unfair for him to shift blame onto her now, especially considering he hadn't supported her after her first sexual assault. His eyes widened in surprise when I told him this, and he demanded to know how I knew about that since no one besides him knew the truth. This is when I explained to him that SIL had confided everything to me and entrusted me with the responsibility of caring for my niece before she passed away. Upon hearing this, my brother became accusatory, claiming I had blindsided him and told me how I was a liar just like SIL. I shook my head and countered by reminding him that SIL had been terminally ill and had suffered enough. After all the years of him not taking responsibility for my niece, while I had done everything in my power to support her, he had no grounds to dredge up the past and complain about it now just because he wanted SIL's money. I was tired of him acting like a victim all the time. It was frustrating to see him shift blame and demand entitlement when he hadn't been financially supportive of my niece all these years. His audacity to come after 16 years and request ownership of her house felt like a slap in the face, disregarding all the sacrifices and efforts I had made to ensure my niece's well-being and future stability. My brother was pissed that I was not giving in to his demands. Ever since our conversation, he and my parents have been repeatedly calling me, demanding that I am being difficult for no reason and that I should have family loyalty for them rather than my niece. It's so weird and scary that when it comes to money, even your blood relations can turn into animals. Ida for standing up for my niece and refusing to give in to my brother's ridiculous demands. Update 1. First of all, I am blown away by how sweet everyone has been in my DMs and in the comments. Thank you for making me smile. Secondly, I cannot tell you the number of women who have reached out to me, talking about how they have gone through what SIL went through and how sorry they feel for her. I wish I could give each and every one of you a big, tight hug and take away your pain. Sexual assault is the worst thing that can happen to a woman, and I wish someone could have helped SIL at the time. She was not a bad person and she didn't deserve to go through what she went through. It's sad that I even have to defend her, but just because you have never been sexually assaulted doesn't mean other people don't go through it. My SIL had fought back during the first assault, showing incredible courage despite the trauma. However, the second incident left her more shaken, and she was understandably frozen in fear, which is what happens, unfortunately, to most victims of sexual assault. I truly wish she had felt comfortable enough to open up to me sooner, because I would have supported her in every way possible. Knowing what she went through breaks my heart, and I only wish I could have been there for her during those dark times. Now coming on to some of you who are calling my SIL a cheater and not believing her story, I pray to God you never have to go through such a traumatic thing and then have people question you. If SIL had truly had an affair, she could have asked me to contact the man for custody after her death. Additionally, if there had been an affair, the man would likely not have stayed silent all these years. He would have definitely shown up for his daughter, especially knowing how much money SIL has left behind for her daughter. Also, if she had indeed had an affair, I'm certain she would have wanted her daughter to know her biological father as well and would have definitely told me. Until her last breath, SIL did everything she could to protect her daughter. Update 2. I sat down with my niece and explained to her that my brother had recently come to talk to me, and his main intention was to take possession of the house. I warned her to be cautious if he ever approached her. As I spoke, I could see the anger and hurt in her eyes. She had held on to hope for so many years, hoping that one day her father would reach out to her because he genuinely cared. But now, discovering that his contact was motivated by his own needs, she felt betrayed. I can't believe him, she told me, her voice trembling with emotion. After all this time, he only reached out when he needed something. She assured me that she wanted nothing to do with him. She told me how glad she was that her mother didn't leave him anything. She then gave me a hug and told me how grateful she was for everything I had done for her over the years. Her words were both heartbreaking and empowering to hear. It made me teary-eyed as I realized that, despite the pain of her father's actions, she was strong and determined to move forward without him. Update 3. After talking with my niece, I decided to send a detailed email to my parents and my brother to document everything and make my stance clear. In the email, I outlined our recent conversations and emphasized that they had no right to ask me to give my niece's home to my brother. I explained that this request amounted to financial fraud and made it clear that I would take legal action if my brother ever tried to visit me or my niece again to ask for the house for his family. I reminded my brother that he had forfeited all rights when he chose not to care for his daughter. I also shared the numerous hardships and struggles I had faced in raising my niece on my own, without any prior experience. I described the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges I had overcome to provide her with a stable and loving home. I further reminded him that he had never paid child support or even checked in on his daughter all these years. I pointed out that both he and my parents should feel nothing but shame for trying to take something that didn't belong to them. I emphasized that they had no right to suddenly step in and make demands after all this time, especially when they had contributed nothing to her upbringing and well-being. The email was long and heartfelt, a testament to the sacrifices I had made for my niece. I underscored my commitment that I would continue to protect her and honor SIL's wishes, no matter what. My message was firm and unequivocal. They had lost their right to be part of her life through their neglect and lack of support, and they had no place in her future now. I never received any reply after sending that email. However, my brother and my parents have not contacted me again, which is good enough for me. The silence speaks volumes, and I'm relieved to have some peace and to know they won't interfere with my niece's life any further. As for my niece, she is busy preparing for her prom and her upcoming birthday party. Watching her navigate these exciting moments fills me with immense pride. I am so proud of the woman she has become and can't wait to be there for her at every major milestone in her future. It already makes me emotional to think about how much she has grown up and how she looks so much like SIL now, especially her lips and eyebrows. I see SIL's strength and resilience in my niece every day. I just hope that she can be as brave as her mother no matter what she does.